Hey guys, what's going on? Dr. Frank here, the founder of Addiction Mindset Recovery Coaching Programs. And in today's brief video, I want to talk about old school weed versus new types of weed that we're seeing today out on the market and how weed consumption has changed over the years and the role that that plays in addiction. Here at Addiction Mindset Recovery Coaching, we help people quit nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy today's video. So, how we consume weed is one of the first major changes that has occurred over the last several years. When I first started smoking weed, it was predominantly dry herb, and I would smoke it out of a bong. I'd smoke it out of a one hitter, a little thing that looked like a crack pipe. I would smoke it out of, an apple. I would smoke it if I was getting fancy, out of a volcano vaporizer or a PAX unit, a handheld PAX unit, if you guys know what that is. Or I just do a good old fashioned joint or blunt, whatever it may be. Now, weed consumption and how I consumed weed, and I think how society consumes weed, has changed dramatically. So we went from that dry herb predominantly and edibles predominantly to an era of disposable vape pens, THC carts, both medicinal and black market. We've edibles that are very, very, very potent, both medicinal and black market. So how we consume weed has changed. It's gone from a bowl and a one hitter and a process, a ritual to set up, got to grind it, got to do all this stuff, to just being able to pick up a pen and take a hit out of that and have an instant, extremely potent high. So how we consume weed has changed. Now, this new method of THC consumption, I think, does have consequences. I know for myself it did. Let me know if you can relate to this in the comments. Once smoking weed was no longer a ritual for me, once it became in the form of a THC cartridge or a pen, my frequency of use increased significantly because it was so much easier to gain access to it. When I was smoking dry herb, there was many scenarios where I didn't want to smell like weed. Even though I would only smoke during the evenings going out to the bars, I wasn't a social smoker. Certainly, I was never a daytime smoker, but I still didn't want to smell. Like, I would shower sometimes before I went out after smoking weed. It was mostly a nighttime ritual for me. When the THC pens came along, when the dab pens came along, now I was smoking before I'd go out. And that increased. Like, not only was I smoking before I'd go out socially with friends, but now I was like smoking before dinner, where normally I'd wait to smoke until after dinner. My frequency of use increased significantly. And there were a few points throughout my evening activities where I was smoking during activities that I normally never would have gotten high for. And again, it had to do with this discreetness and the ease of access, the ease of use. Another thing that changed with the THC cartridges, and even you see this in a lot of edible products, is the ease of access to high-potency THC products. We're now seeing a lot more concentrates. We're now seeing a lot more isolates. We're seeing not different weed. Weed is still the same thing. Weed is weed. But how we extract it and what we do with the cannabinoids within that weed product has changed dramatically. And now we're seeing a significantly increased potency when it comes to THC. And I think not only are we seeing an increased potency, but we're seeing a lot higher frequency of consumption. So combine increased potency with an increased frequency of consumption, along with an easier mode of consumption, an easier mode of access to the THC. And I think we're teeing up to have more issues with addiction. I'm glad that we're getting rid of regulations on as far as government goes and banning cannabis and demonizing it. We never should have done that in the first place. But just some stuff to think about here, okay? Along with that, another thing that we've seen over the years is a boom in the black market THC industry. I remember when I used to buy weed, it was like my buddy was growing it or a friend of a friend, or maybe we'd have some plug in like Cali who would ship some good stuff. But we never had all these black market edibles, all these black market THC cartridges. Like, the black market THC industry is booming right now, in part because state regulated places can't, they can't reduce their prices enough because they got to charge this crazy tax on it. That's an area where our government, if they were serious about helping us with this, could really back off on some of the taxes on these things. And they could also loosen up some of the regulations on some of these dispensaries, because right now the black market is booming. And I think we all got to sit back and take a second and say, where the hell are all these THC cartridges coming from? Like, where are all these things? Is it China? Is it Mexico? Is it? I have no idea. But like, they exploded just prior to COVID kicking off. Like, they were all over the place, and they still are. They're still all over the high schools and the college campuses and things like that. So the black market, I think they gained a lot more access to people because of these different modes of delivery and stuff like that. I got to imagine it's pretty easy to transport a lot of those things. The next thing that's changed when it comes to weed consumption, I believe, is where society is as a whole. So when I first started smoking weed, that was back in college, and it was like a really enjoyable experience. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a problem. And now here we are in this 2021, we got COVID, we have a lot of isolation, we have a lot of stress, right? We're an isolated society, and we're a really stressed out society. And I think when you combine that with higher potency weed that you have really easy access to, both legal and black market, with a different mode of consumption, the THC cartridges and the THC pens, I think you're teeing off for addiction, especially if it's something that we're not talking about. And it's something, I get demonized a lot on this channel for talking about this. And I think that's sad, because I think the more we talk about it, the more we can avoid problems going into the future. That's just my take on it. So I think weed has changed a lot. I think the society as a whole has changed. And in turn, how people are using weed has changed. And I just think we have to be cautious. And the last thing I'll say is this. We've also seen a dramatic change in the types of cannabis that people are consuming. So now we have purely Delta 8, purely Delta 9, purely Delta 10. Now we're seeing this emergence of THC acetate, THCO, CBD. What's happening to the individual that's combining all these things? A little bit of Delta 8 in the morning, a little bit of Delta 9 at night, a little bit of Delta 10 or THC acetate on the weekend. What's happening to that individual's endocannabinoid system? We don't know. We don't have studies on that stuff. I'm not saying we need studies on everything. I just don't know that I'd want to be the person experimenting with all that. Certainly now that I've, found a good thing to do and I'm enjoying myself in recovery and sobriety, I don't want to be part of that. But just some things for you guys to think about, whether this applies to your sobriety or harm reduction. I hope it helps you out. Why don't you go ahead and follow me into the next video where I talk about cannabis and mental health. I'll see you there.